And then the third question, which is really the most important one, is what do you need to do to prepare for your own dying? So what do you need to do before you die?
Right.
What's important to you?
Yeah.
And so that's where I like to spend my work. In that.
The two friends, actually, I had another friend.
I know who you are. They're right there in my mind right now.
Yes, and both of them approached it very differently. One very, very strong faith-based, and God is going to heal me. God is, I'm not going to die, and so let's not talk about it. Now, that was good for that individual. I'm not, well, I mean, that was where he was coming from, and I had to respect that, and I wasn't going to push past that, past the place where he wanted to go. However, it was very difficult for others of us who saw him going down that road, and it wasn't till just a week or so before he said, Ron, he said, this is it. And we got to say, I'm going to miss you. That was the difficult one, right? That was, and it was at a point where I would have liked to have had that longer conversation.
Exactly.
The other friend, dying pretty much about the same time, when he found out he had the terminal death notice, he called me up. He said, Ron, we need to talk. Very practical. He said, they've given me this amount of time, you know, that, and I'm going to do everything that I can, and within our power in the medical, to put that off. I'm not rushing toward it. However, we need to talk. And I want to share with you about it, and I want to do everything that I can, and maybe you can help prepare family for those days that are coming. And I'm not making a judgment on either one, but because each of us, well, I don't know how I'm going to face that. What would you encourage? I mean, really, even on a Facebook, somebody says about, you're almost afraid to say, I'm sorry that so-and-so died.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, you know, or that you're facing death. It's like, like you want to say, oh, well, you're going to be passing away again. You know, like it's that conversation. You work with people all of the time. How do you help them get to that?
Well, I think you know, what you said is so true. The truth in that is that if we could talk about it, it would make it easier for us to live. For me, talking about death now, the earlier we can do that, what it does is two things. It helps me get prepared what I need to prepare for, so that it's not a crash thing. And I don't just mean my funeral arrangements. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about exactly what your friend did. Who do I need to talk to? What are the relationships that I need to say goodbye to? So I, as you might imagine, have been with a lot of people at death, and have said, you know, knowing that they're going to die and I'm not going to be there, I made up my mind a long time ago that rather than saying goodbye to people, I say thank you. So I will go into somebody for the last time. I know they're not, you know, I won't see them again, and I will say to them, thank you, and then I'll be truthful about things I'm thankful for, having met them. So obviously, friends, people who I've known a long time, I will use that as a real gratitude moment. And I will. What bothers me, and you've been a pastor longer than I have. You've been to so many funerals. You've conducted so many funerals. And I always feel sad at funerals, listening to people say these wonderful things about people who never said that when they were alive. And I think, why couldn't you have had the time? Or why didn't you make the effort. Well, maybe it wasn't them. Maybe it was the person that you said avoided their own dying.
Right.
And again, I've heard that. Believe me, I know that one. Yeah. You know, they're going to get healed.
Right.
And this isn't about it happens or it doesn't happen.
Right.
But what it does is it prevents us from doing that work.
Right.
Because, Ron, we're all going to die.
Right. We have a termination date, right?
That,
we don't know when it is.
We don't.
Well, one of my other friends, and this is a little bit humorous, he woke up in the middle of the night with some major chest pains, and so he says to his wife, you need to take me to the hospital. And she said, well, you know, middle of the night, okay. They rush him to the hospital. She drops him off at the door, and then she goes to park. He walks in, and she's parking the car. She gets a notice on her phone, by the way, you need to come in here. We've just revived your husband, or he's just dying. And so he tells me afterwards, and this is one where you died and come back, which is funny in and of itself. But he's getting his OHIP card out for them, and he just drops over dead. Yeah. And the lady comes rushing around the desk, and she starts working on him. And they had to hit him twice with the paddles. Yep. And so his wife comes in there and realizes he's just had some major issue, and now they're putting the stents in his heart. So he told me afterwards. He said, Ron, he said, I've got so much pain. He said, my chest. He said, when I was dead, I didn't feel anything.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, and now I've got to deal with this stuff. Right. It's like, next time I die.
Let me die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you know, that raises an interesting point. Talk about a life-death moment, right? One of the things that we do need to prepare for is when people come close, and certainly part of our work was a DNR, or a do not resuscitate.
Right, yes.
Now, people get all excited about that and say, oh, no, that means I'm giving up. Don't do that. Yeah. A DNR doesn't mean that they won't try. You know, if you go in and you're,
it's reasonable,
you need something treated with an antibiotic, they're going to treat you.
Or a stent.
Or a stent, something like that. Yeah. It's only when, you know, at the last moment your heart stops, and they're not going to. But people, my first career was in respiratory technology, so I worked in the hospitals for 10 years. Right. I saw what happens, and I know what happens when they do chest compressions. And the older you are, believe me, you don't want chest compressions. So people think that's a bad thing to have a DNR. It's actually a very helpful thing, because if that's where you're at, and you're at that point in age, then that's the best thing.
And you've already faced.
Right, you've already faced.
You've talked about it.
We've talked about it. Right? We've prepared. But you see, if we've never talked about it till that moment of crisis, and I haven't had a chance to say to my family, you know what, if I'm in there, I don't want to be resuscitated, then the family gets all excited, and they're forced to make the decision for you. Right. And of course they're going to say, well, do everything you can. But is that the best decision? And is that the right decision? Even as your friend said, you know. Now, you know, if I next time, he was joking a little bit, but there's truth to those pieces. But again, all of those are positive things to talk about our dying. What's important to me when I die?
Part of that, you mentioned about the families and getting distraught about the DNR. Do you think talking about and being prepared yourself, but also preparing them for what happens?
And having the conversation with your family. Right. So that there's two stages to my work when I worked with them. One was the person who has the terminal illness. Right. And secondly, to say, okay, what do we need to do with your family? Right. How do you want to talk to them? What's important? Right. Sometimes it's easy and say, well, you know what, my family, they get it, and we have that. Right. Other times there's conflict. Okay. And sometimes there's conflict over what they are going to do. I mean, it comes to aggressive treatment, for instance. Right. Sometimes there's, you know, family members that just want everything done. Right. And sometimes the the person, if they're older, they don't really want everything done, but they don't want to go against their children.
Don't want to disappoint the
so
children.
they try to, make it okay for their children, which isn't the best for them.
Right. So how do you navigate that?
So the better option there is to say, okay, can we have an honest conversation?
Right. Yes.
Can we have an honest conversation?
Right.
And it needs probably facilitated.
Right.
Because if it's just, there's too much power things going on.
Right.
So if somebody can facilitate that and we can talk about it, then it's easier. It's hard. I'm not trying to make death easy.
Right.
And I say to people, just because something is hard doesn't mean it's wrong. We have to deal with these things. So there's a lot we can do. And honestly, Ron, the better we do here, the better it is for grief on the other side for families.
Yes.
If the death was difficult and acrimonious and conflicting, the grief is going to be conflicting and acrimonious. If I get to hear the person who's dying, if I get to hear them tell me things that are important and stories, those are the things that I will hold on to over here. But if all I'm dealing with here is denial, and I don't want to go there and don't talk to me about it, I'm shutting them out, and it's going to impact my grief.
So we never know when that day or how it's going to happen. And I've shared with you and others different people who've passed away in my life who some were sudden, right? Boom, just there, gone. And never had the conversations that would have been meaningful.
Right.
But if the discussion about death and your life, your death, is a normal part of life, you do get to address those things.
Exactly.
Even prior to something that's unexpected.
Exactly. Very much true. There's so much, and even that, and I say to people, because people immediately, when I've met them, they've already seen their oncologist and given the news around, there's nothing more, quote, we can do for you. And they're all given a time. So, we'll give you 6 months, 8 months, a year. I've been told I have a year. I hear that all the time. My first response to them is, okay, I want you to know something. No palliative physician will ever guarantee you a time. What you've been given is an average. Here's what we might expect. But that's not necessarily true. Now, here's what happens. As soon as somebody hears that, I've got 6 months, that's what they fixate on. They fixate on 6 months. And if we can talk about it, here's what I want to do. I want to move them from fixating on 6 months to enjoying today. But if all I think about, I've got 5 months, now I've got 5 months and 36 days, and I'm counting down, then you can't live life because you are fixated on that. And the truth is, nobody knows for sure. It could be sooner, it could be longer.
So how do you help them?
So part of it is that exactly having this conversation. So, okay, you've been told that, but here's the truth. That may be true, but it may not be. But how do you want to live? And this is about them. So, I'm doing it very fast, but eventually we'll get to there. So how do you want to live your life? You have today. So do you want to waste today worrying about 6 months from now? Or do you want to find ways you can live today, given how your health is and what you're able to do? Because 4 months from now, you may not be able to do what you can do today. And if all you've done is just sit here thinking about your 6 month date. Now, funny story. I met, I got a referral from one of the physicians to go and see her new patient. And she warned me, she said, he's quite an interesting character. That was on the referral form. So I go to meet him. I mean, I love that. To me, that's an invitation. I can hardly wait to meet you.
That's right.
So I meet this guy, and he meets me. He's fully ambulatory. He's walking around. He's a big guy. He invites me into the apartment. He says, well, I'm past my expiration date. I said, well, that's good. Yep. He said, they told me I had 6 months. It's now been a year. So for him, he was already at expiration. Now he's living in the past. But there's an example of somebody who's got that in their mind. And I'm thinking, you know what? I don't care when your date is. It'll come, whether you want it or not. There's nothing you're going to do about that. But I want to know how you want to live today.
Yes,
And how do we get to live today?
Yeah.
What do we? So when I say, what do you need to do to prepare for your dying?
Right.
Okay, who are the people you need to talk to?
Right.
What are the stories to talk about our earlier one?
Right.
What
Yes,
stories do you need to tell?
Right. That are going to be lost if you don't tell them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Who do you need to ask forgiveness for?
Ah, that's a big one, isn't it?
Who do you need?
Yeah.
You know, what's
and that's the one thing. Whatever side a person takes when it comes to medical assistance in dying, one of the things about not rushing that in, it allows for people to reach a point of forgiveness and deal with issues that maybe they wouldn't have if it was boom. Now, there are, as we said, tragic events where you don't get that.
Right.
Boy, you better learn to live with a level of forgiveness.
Right.
But when it comes to dying, that's a huge one, I would think, is it?
Yeah. Oh, it's a big one, and it can weigh on people. Which again, though, is if we could learn, if we could accept the fact that I will die someday,
Yes.
and that I don't know when that day will happen,
Right.
it will choose me to live today differently.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to allow unforgiveness to go on in my life now, because I might die tomorrow in an accident. So I better live today. I have found it allows me to choose. You know, there's some people, to be honest with you, Ron, when I first really got into this work, and when in my training, you have to do this for yourself. You can't, that's where you begin. You have to do this work yourself, right? So I remember doing that work, and when I finished, I thought, here's what I thought. You know, there's some people in my life that all they do is drain me of energy. Every time I'm with them, it's just like they suck me dry.
Right.
Why would I need that?
Yes, yeah.
And there's other people in my life who just fill me up.
Right, yeah.
Who I just love to be with.
Yeah.
That's who I'm going to be with.
Yes, yeah.
And so I, got rid of a lot of those Facebook people who who really don't contribute anything to my life.
Yeah. Well, there's an awful lot on Facebook that drains people, and it's like...
So, and why do I need to do that?
And divisive,
if I only have this much life left, and we move towards our own dying.
Right.
And so, I can move towards that dying, and if I only have limited time, even if that's 20 years, and why do I waste it on things that aren't important? Why don't I do it with things that are meaningful?
Right. When you think about that, there are people that you can enjoy the presence for a couple of hours in a gathering and an event, or whether it be in the foyer at church, in the community hall, or in the community downtown, or wherever it might be. But if I have to deal with it every day on my Facebook, it's like, well, you know what, we don't have that much in common sometimes.
It's true.
So let's not let's diverse ours. We're not obligated to everybody. Right.
And we should have learned that when I was, I don't think we learn that till we get a little older, but I think you and I both, I think we could make a very clear case of ministry doing that to us, how that we sacrificed in many cases the people we love the most for people that maybe that drained us, that demanded our attention more than they deserved. Right. And I mean, I think that, but when we're younger and death isn't part of our thinking.
We're not thinking about.
We think we have the rest of the time.
Right.
But the truth is that the people who are most important to me, those are the ones that really deserve my time.
Yes.
Now there are people who, who I need to spend time with too.
Right.
That I want to, that I choose to.
But it's not saying that we don't spend time and that we treat people with disregard or anything else. There are people who give you life. Right. And there are people who don't. And the people who don't often don't want what you're going to offer them anyway. Right. So you're trying to push something that's not on their radar anyway. And they'll just suck the
suck
life
it out of you.
with that.
And I think it comes back to choice.
Yeah.
Death, when I come to realize I will die,
Right.
then I take my choices more seriously.
And how
do I
today?
choose to live?
Yeah.
What's important? What's meaningful?
Right.
And that meaningfulness is huge, because at the end of life, when I'm with people at their end of their life, we often do a life review. Talk about, tell me about your life.
Yes, there's
what
stories.
do you remember?
Yeah.
What's important? What's meaningful?
Memories,
And I like that word, meaningful.
Right.
So sometimes people will say to me, I feel really bad because I don't think my life made any difference to anybody, and I didn't do what I should have done. And I'll hear all of that side of it, and then I'll let them talk. I don't judge them, but then I may say to them, so tell me about your children.
Yeah, yes.
Tell me about your grandkids.
Yes.
And they'll tell me stories of how they connected, and they don't realize what is meaningful. It doesn't have to be these great big grand things, but having a place in somebody else's life could be the most meaningful thing of all.
In the Western culture, we have built a system of success around things that don't always line up, right?
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
And that's where death, I think death is the level ground.
Yeah.
We're all there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. And a lot of traditions. So, when you think, I think a Jewish tradition where or even in most Eastern religions, people who die are dressed common. They're no different. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are. You're all dressed the same way.
I like that,
and there isn't this distinction in death the way there is in Western society. And I think we're fooling ourselves when we do those things. The truth is, no matter who you are, how much money you have, how many friends you have, whatever your status, you will die.
So thank you again, and thank you for listening to this session with us, and we will come back with more from David.